You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 145. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Have you ever asked yourself what it is that makes time management so challenging for lawyers? If so, then you are absolutely in the right place. Thank you for joining me for this week's podcast episode. Today, we are diving into time management for lawyers. And specifically, we're going to talk about what makes the practice of law unique such that time management is so difficult. And perhaps more importantly, I am going to offer you strategies and solutions to help you better manage your time. The goal here is for you to feel more in control of your schedule, to feel more confident about the choices that you're making, more clarity over what it is that you want to spend your time on and how you can structure your time to make the most of each day. And finally, so that you can feel a greater sense of calm and peace because you know how best to schedule and manage your time. So if that resonates with you, you are absolutely in the right place. I practiced for over a dozen years, so I know firsthand what it's like to practice as a lawyer, some of the demands that are placed on your shoulders. I also spent a number of those years practicing with my children. So I've got two kids, ages 11 and 9, and if you have children, then you know that they add additional constraints to your time in terms of your workday and what is involved in managing your household and your work schedule. And now I have my coaching practice where I'm constantly learning new tools, new time management, new practice management tools that I help lawyers with and that I apply in my own practice. So what I am offering you today comes based on my experience as a lawyer, my experience as a coach, and my experience helping lawyers just like you to gain that clarity, that confidence, that sense of control, and that peace and calm when it comes to your schedule. So the way we're going to structure today's conversation, it's a little bit different from other podcast episodes in that I really just want to focus on two things. The first thing is what is unique about a legal practice and how does this impact on your ability to manage your time? That's the first part. The second part is I want to share with you a list of strategies, tools that I would love to offer you that will help you gain more control over your practice. And the reason why I'm setting it up this way is that I've just created a podcast roadmap and it's available to you. You can download it. I will provide a link along with the show notes to this episode. And I have compiled all of the time management episodes that I have recorded throughout this podcast series. There are 25 plus podcast episodes about time management. And as I was compiling those episodes, I looked at them. I identified the themes in each of these episodes, and I've organized them in such a way that if you're new to the podcast or even a longtime listener, you can see all the time management episodes in one place. You can see how they can be organized to help you go step by step through each of the stages that I think are important for you to develop a greater sense of control over your time. So I'm going to get to that second, but first let's talk about what it is about being a lawyer that makes it hard to manage your time. Now, the first in this list is one that will not come to a surprise to you, and that is that law itself, the problems that you're helping to solve, don't necessarily respect a 9-to-5 schedule. So, for example, if you're a family law lawyer and it's the holiday season and there's a fight over who gets to have the kids on which days, that's a real problem that doesn't really pay attention to whether or not you shut your doors at 5 o'clock or you've taken time off for the holidays yourself. If you're a deal lawyer and there's a closing date and it's absolutely essential that the parties get things done by that date, then you are operating on that schedule, whether it means that you need to spend a couple weekends at the office or more, or if you've got a vacation planned that maybe you're not going to take. If you are a litigator and your client all of a sudden is teetering on insolvency and you need to get into court on an emergency application to make a creditor protection application, you're going to be there rain or shine. You might have an injunction application that you need to make. There are real life problems that are happening among your clients and they are turning to you for their help. And so it happens that your job is not one that is contained in a 9-to-5 framework. Now, add to that the way that you practice. So, for example, if you're in private practice, you may kind of have set hours, but chances are you've got a lot of discretion over your actual hours, and that provides you with flexibility. And it also means that you may find yourself working regularly into the evenings. If you've got a hybrid situation set up, you might find that you're working at home after you get back from the office. You may do most of your work from home. And you might find that there's a difficulty in maintaining that delineation between your work life and your non-work life. And this has been happening since pre-pandemic, but I think it's probably gotten a little bit trickier following the pandemic because we are now so fluid in terms of how we work. It's so much easier now to work remotely because many of us are set up for that happening. Now, in addition to the nature of the work, in addition to the flexibility of the working arrangements, we also have practices that may be ones where you are operating with clients in different time zones. So you might need to be taking calls in the middle of the night in order to accommodate your client requests. There may be certain challenges that are inherent to your practice that make it really difficult for you to maintain a clear schedule. Other challenges that you might see is the unpredictable nature of your practice. So you never really know when things are going to happen, when things are going to explode. There's a certain level of predictability, but not always. There is also the ebb and flow of a practice. You'll have seasons where you're really, really busy and then seasons where maybe you're not so busy. And so trying to manage the ebb and flow of your work schedule, you might find that because of the unpredictability, you need to cancel plans last minute, whether it's dinner with friends or a family vacation that you've scheduled. You might also find that you show up at work, you've got your to-do list, and you just don't get it done because the emails are flying in and you're so busy responding to emails that you don't end up getting your work done, or somebody comes into your office and they have a really important question to ask you. And again, you don't get to the work that you'd scheduled to do that day. And so as a result, your practice can feel really reactive. You might feel like you're constantly stressed while you are at work. You might find that you're making decisions from a place of fear and anxiety. And you might also find that you operate in a culture where everybody around you is also operating the same way. It might be this culture of busyness where everybody kind of seems like they're stretched on time. Everybody is really busy. Nobody has the time to talk. It's rush, rush, rush. People wear busy as a badge of honor. And so it becomes part of the culture. Now, for those of you who record billable hours, you may have that additional layer of challenge when it comes to time management. In part because of what a billable hour does in terms of our perception of time and also how we set our priorities. So I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of whether a billable hour is a good thing or a bad thing. But what I will say here is that often with a billable hour, you will also have a target. And a target is, for many lawyers, this thing that looms over their head. So when you take vacation and you're away from work for an entire 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe even a month, you realize that you are falling behind in the sense that you are not accruing hours toward your yearly target. And that can feel really stressful because when you get back from vacation, then you need to make up for that time. Or maybe you're making up that time while you're on vacation, in which case you're not necessarily unplugging truly while you are on break. Now, you might also find with a billable hour is that it places a premium on the time that you spend billing. So if you are at work, you may have less of an emphasis on activities that aren't necessarily directly billable. So things like client development, building relationships with others within your organization, mentoring, taking on additional continuing education. So there are things that may be really important to your practice: planning, scheduling, things that are essential and helpful and will help you to have a better overall practice, better managed time, more of a thriving practice, deeper relationships. Those things don't necessarily get prioritized in an environment where the billable hour is paramount. And then outside of work, you might also find that you are doing less of some of the things that you really love and need to recharge because there's not as much of a premium placed on those hours. So you might think of rest, right? And maybe it's really difficult for you to rest without feeling guilty, like you should be at the office, helping out your colleagues, helping out your clients. You may feel also that it's difficult to have hobbies. So maybe you had a lot of hobbies before and now you don't have any hobbies. You might find it's difficult to get adequate self-care, so enough sleep even, or exercise, or proper nutrition. And you might find that you're sacrificing time with friends and family as well. So in that environment, you can see how there are so many challenges that present that make it more difficult for you to manage your time. A couple of other things that arise for lawyers is this idea that there's no limit really to what you can take on, especially if you're in private practice. So you may have numerous files, numerous different clients. None of them speak to each other. They don't know that each other exists. You're the centerpiece. You're the person who's responding and doing on all these different mandates. And so there's no real sense of knowing what's going to happen when on which file. So it can be really challenging to set your priorities. Also, when you are in an environment where you're used to these ebbs and flows, it can be really challenging to feel motivated if you are in one of those periods that is a little bit slower. For example, after you close a big deal or after you wrap up a big trial. So I've listed here a number of reasons why it can be difficult for lawyers to manage their time, right? These are characteristics of a legal practice that are fairly unique to lawyers, especially if you contrast it with professions, for example, where there's a very set and predictable schedule. One example is the example of teachers. I have a number of teachers in my family. I have tons of respect for the work that they do. I have my kids in school, and I can assure you, I revere their teachers. I think they're amazing, and I love the work that they do to educate and support our children. And when you look at a teacher's schedule, they can tell fairly far in advance when their summer holidays are going to be. They know when winter holidays are going to be. They have a curriculum that they have designed. They know what the hours are going to be for school. It's not like we're going to come along and say, oh, by the way, the school day is going to change from 9 to 3 to 9 to 7 for the next 3 weeks. It just doesn't happen in their work. And so for you as a lawyer, there's this variability in your work that may not be present in other professions. And so we need to look at time management through the lens of what is going to work best for you. Now, at this point, what I'd love to do is turn toward the solution, turn toward what I have learned in my years of practice, both as a lawyer and as a coach who works with lawyers. I can tell you that what I have observed is that there is no one-size-fits-all solution for everybody. Lawyers with different practices will find different tools to be helpful. Your learning style will impact what tools are good for you. For example, if you're somebody who is very tactile, you're going to want more paper systems versus if you're someone who is more digital, you may want digital apps, those types of systems. And so everybody is going to be different. So there is no one size fits all. But what I have done over the course of my work with lawyers is I've collected a number of tools and strategies, and themes have emerged, and I'm going to share those themes with you today. Now, as I go through these themes, there are 5 of them altogether. I would invite you to download the podcast map that I created. It is called the Time Management for Lawyers podcast map, and it takes the episodes from this podcast series and it organizes them into these themes. So as we go through the themes today, you can think about which of these themes resonate most with you. And then you can go to that roadmap and listen to the episodes that most align with what you need. Now you can follow them in the order that I've presented, which I think is a good flow. I think it will help you. If you were to listen to one of those episodes every day, you'd probably get there in about a month. There's 27 episodes once I add this one that deal with time management. And if you apply what you learn, even one thing at a time over the course of listening to these episodes, you will see the transformation in your practice. You don't have to go in the order that I suggest though, because ultimately it depends on what's going to be most helpful for you. So with that, I'm going to share the 5 stages that I cover that I think are essential for building a time management system that works for you in your legal practice. So the very first stage that I recommend is the foundational stage of learning tips and tricks that you can apply right away in your practice. I think that you should dive straight in and start doing things like creating a schedule, like creating systems, like looking at your docketing and creating efficiencies there, making sure that you are capturing all of your time, planning your weeks ahead of time, planning your big picture goals. So the first stage of the time management adjustments that I would recommend is to start with the tools, because you're going to learn the tools and you can then start applying the ones that resonate most with you. And you're going to start to see an immediate impact in your practice. And it's that immediate gratification, that immediate impact that is going to give you the motivation to continue to work on your time management mastery. So that is stage 1. Now, stage 2 is working on your mindset. Now, as you practice as a lawyer, as you're surrounded by individuals who have certain beliefs about time, you are consciously or unconsciously being influenced. And your mindset about time is one that you may or may not be aware of. Now, if you find yourself saying things like, I'm running out of time, I'm never going to have enough time to get this done, this is a waste of time, then you already have a sense of your own mindset about time. And what you may not be conscious of is that you have scarcity thinking around time, right? If you're thinking that there's never enough time, you may have a scarcity time mindset. You may feel a lot of guilt around time if you try to rest and you feel like that time isn't being used properly. It's not productive enough. It's not focused enough. Again, you may have a concept, a mindset around time that you are not even aware of. And so the second stage in the process is to gain awareness about how you're thinking about time, and then to be intentional about how you choose to think about time. So here is where we are really rewiring the way that you think. And the effect of that is actually to decrease stress in your practice. If you spend your days believing that you have all the time that you need to get done what you need to get done, you are going to feel so much more at ease relative to running through your day feeling like there's not enough time to get things done. And you have control over how you think, and you are able to alter your mindset. So that is step 2. You start with step 1, you start implementing strategies, you see the changes that you're making in your practice, and then you move into mindset. You start to get more conscious about how you are thinking about time and adopting a mindset that is more aligned with what you actually want to create in your practice. Altering your mindset also makes the tips and tricks more effective, because now you have a different sense of confidence that what you're going to be doing will create the result that you want. Now, stage 3 is a deeper dive into the mental component of time. And what I mean by that is that your executive functioning skills are ultimately what are helping you organize your days, plan for the future, prioritize what you decide to do, focus on the work that you want to focus on, initiate tasks, regulate your emotions, which it turns out is highly relevant to time management. If you think about your emotions and that they are regulated by your executive function, that impacts on your ability to manage stress. That impacts on the degree of procrastination. The two go hand in hand. And you are then able, when you understand your executive functioning skills, you are better able to leverage them and use them to organize yourself, plan, execute, implement in a way that is so much more productive and effective. Now, in my practice, the reason I got so interested in executive functioning skills is because I have had a number of lawyer clients who have come to me and told me that they have ADHD. And as it turns out, I also have a number of people who are really close to me in my personal life who also have ADHD. And so I have done a deep dive over the past few years into ADHD. And a component of that is learning more about executive functioning skills and how they work. And this is learning that is applicable whether or not you have ADHD. I've done additional coaching training for those who have ADHD. I just started another program today to increase my coaching capacity in that area. I'm so excited about what I'm going to learn there, because for all of us as humans, we have these skills. And when we learn to use them, particularly in relation to time management, it can have such a profound effect on how effective we are. So in the series of steps, we start with the time management foundational tools and strategies. Then we look at mindset. Then we do a deep dive into executive functioning skills. So there are a series of podcast episodes that I have created that walk you through all of the relevant executive functioning skills and tie them to time management. And I take you through the 4 stages of a project. So that first stage being what you need to do before you start a project. So that's your planning and strategizing. I help you with task initiation, getting started in that project that will really help you if you find that you procrastinate. Then there's the third stage, which is staying focused, which you know is challenging in our environment where you've got emails coming in, they pull your focus away and you need to learn to bring that focus back to the task that you're trying to complete. And then finally, that 4th stage of actually completing a task, what it takes in terms of your executive function to do that. So that is the 3rd stage in your time management process, your journey. And that is really going to help you to understand how your brain works and how you're going to better manage the tasks on your plate. Now, stage 4 is one that is devoted to procrastination. Why is there an entire section devoted to procrastination? Because it's something that comes up so often in my coaching practice. And there are 3 types of procrastination that I see that I have talked about on the podcast. Now, the first type of procrastination that I deal with is the procrastination that I alluded to earlier. And that is this idea of procrastination that arises because there is a lack of urgency. So if you've got a practice that gets really intense, you spend several weeks preparing for and attending trial, and then it goes quiet, or you have a big deal and you're 24/7 until the last of the documents have all been signed. And then there's this quiet period. Or sometimes even if you go on vacation and you come back to the office and things haven't quite picked up yet. A lot of lawyers struggle with that transition time because they're used to having a fire under their belly, and all of a sudden there is no fire. And so without the urgency, it can be really, really hard to get motivated and to initiate tasks. And you may find that you put things off, you procrastinate, you don't use your time effectively, and then you get upset with yourself for lacking motivation and not getting things done when you have the time. So that is a flavor of procrastination. I deal with that in the podcast episodes. A second flavor of procrastination that is really common among lawyers is the procrastination that is attached to perfectionism. So if you have really high expectations of a piece of work that you are about to undertake, whether you're drafting an argument or writing a really complicated email to a client, having a particular conversation, whatever it happens to be, you may feel like it needs to be perfect, and you might feel overwhelmed. You might feel like it's never going to be good enough. And so you push the task off into the future, And one of the drawbacks of that, of course, is the more you push that task forward, the less time you have available to do the task. This can get really sticky if you've got a court filing deadline and you keep pushing it off so much so that you're writing your submissions the night before and just getting them done before the filing deadline. That can be really sticky. So that is a flavor of procrastination that I see with lawyers, and I offer some tools and strategies to help you with that type of procrastination. Now, the third flavor of procrastination is what I think of as big picture procrastination. So you might call it that too, big picture procrastination. And this is a sneaky type of procrastination because what it is when you get so busy with your day to day. So you're dealing with your clients, you're putting out fires. Maybe you've got kids at home, so you go to work, then you rush home and make them dinner and get them to bed, and you repeat the cycle. And so you're constantly busy. You're constantly running. So you don't feel like you're procrastinating because you're always doing something. You're not the type of person to put things off. But what you might find is that beneath the surface, way back in the recesses of your mind, are these big questions. Are you in the right job? Should you be doing this? Is what you're doing aligned with what you want in the long term? Is there a future there for you? And you might be pushing that question off, telling yourself that you'll deal with it after the trial has wrapped up. You'll deal with it in a year's time. You've got too many clients that you're focused on right now. Maybe you're waiting for a bonus period or you're waiting for some other thing, but you end up pushing off these big questions, things that really matter to you, and keeping yourself busy with the day to day. And so being able to identify where this big picture procrastination is coming from, what some of those questions are that you need to answer, can be so impactful. And you need to give yourself the space and the time to answer those questions and sometimes even just see what those questions are. So that is the fourth stage. So just to recap, we start with the tips and tricks, the strategies that you can use to better manage your time. Then you move into your mindset, the way that you think about time, your relationship with time. Then third, we move into your executive functioning skills. We understand how your brain works, how you are organizing, how you're planning, how you're regulating your emotions. Then we move into procrastination and we look at whether you have procrastination that is caused by the cyclical nature of your practice, whether it's perfectionism, whether there's a big question that you are trying to avoid by keeping busy. And then finally, we get to this section where we dive into priorities and boundaries. Now, priorities and boundaries run throughout. Always, you will be dealing with tasks that you are executing, which will hopefully align with what it is that you want to do. But as you gain awareness of your time, as you look at the strategies that you're using, what it is that you're putting on your calendar, where you're struggling the most, you are actually going to start to notice what activities truly belong on your calendar and which activities you might want to let go. So we spend several episodes diving into your priorities, how to spend wisely from your bank of yes. Where do you want to focus your time and your energy? And we also focus on boundaries. This is what you need to do to protect your priorities because there are always going to be demands on your time. People are going to want your help and you are going to need to learn how to choose the projects that you say yes to and the projects that you say no to. And I get it. We are in a service industry. And so you want to preserve relationships. So how can you set boundaries? How can you say no without burning bridges? So that is where you're going to spend your time in that fifth area of the process, the fifth part of the roadmap. That is where you're going to dive deep into how to set priorities and how to maintain and protect those priorities through setting and enforcing your boundaries. So this is what the roadmap looks like. As I've described, these are the challenges that you are facing as a lawyer, the scheduling challenges, the billable hour, that, and I've got a 5-stage roadmap that you can then use to help yourself figure out what these challenges are for you, what resonates most strongly, and you'll have access to all of the tools and concepts that you can then apply in your practice to help you get better control over your time, to gain that clarity, to gain that confidence, and ultimately feel the calm that you will have when you feel like your time is managed. So what I recommend here is that you download the roadmap, have a look at all the different episodes, see how they're laid out, identify which of those episodes are going to be most helpful for you, and then you can go ahead and listen to them. And as you listen to them, I recommend that you listen for a single takeaway. Now, you can maybe identify more than one, but you want to make it doable and manageable for yourself. So you don't have to overwhelm yourself by applying everything that you learn all at once. Take what resonates most with you and you can apply that. So when you download the roadmap, you'll have access to all of those episodes. They're laid out. There's a brief description of each of the episodes. They're all organized in these 5 themes that I've just taken you through. And you'll also find that there's a link to a playlist on Spotify, so you can have all those episodes in one place. Otherwise, you are welcome to listen to them on your favorite podcast app, wherever it is that you go to listen to your episodes. So this is what I have for you this week. I hope this is so helpful for you. I hope you love this resource as much as I loved creating it. It really is the culmination of the last 6 years of coaching work that I have done with lawyers, along with my own experience as a lawyer. And if you find that you'd like additional assistance with any of it, by all means, please do feel free to reach out to me for some one-to-one attention. I can help you implement the strategies that I talk about in the podcast into your practice. If you are in an organization where you want support, you'd like someone to come in and help your lawyers or your staff with their time management, by all means, please feel free to reach out to me. It's something that I do fairly regularly, and I would love the opportunity to support you and your team to tighten up their practices, to understand some of the challenges they're having, to feel validated, right? To feel validated that if they are struggling with time management, this is not unique to them. This is not unique to you. These are real challenges, and many smart lawyers have challenged or have faced these challenges, and there are ways to overcome them. So thank you so much for joining me for this week's podcast episode. I hope that this roadmap is something that is going to really help you make significant changes in your practice. You're going to feel that calm, that confidence, that control, and that clarity over how you choose to spend your days. So with that, thanks again for joining me. I very much look forward to seeing you next week, and I hope you enjoy the roadmap. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. For instructions on how to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast launch. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.